Hey everybody, I'm Matt Valley. Welcome to episode number 130 of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the insights and research pros that you trust. Well, hey, today is a special day because I've got my former client and good friend, Scott Tilford, on the podcast with me today. So let me tell you a couple things about Scott. We actually met in 2007, I want to say, when he was at Procter Gamble, where he spent over 17 years. He had a really good career there. At the time, he was working on the global FMOT team, which refers to the first moment of truth, phrase that you might associate with P&G. But he did have a very good career there. He started on the FMOT team. He moved sort of consistently up, had a few stops along the way, and he finished as a senior director of the grooming category in Insights. And, that's actually my favorite category. It includes Gillette and some other products. So good on you for keeping my shave nice and tight, Scott, whatever role
Do
you
what
play.
we can.
I appreciate that. But Scott is great because he's one of the guests that we've had that have decided to move on from Insights in a way. So he's still doing it. He's got a consultancy. He's continuing to help people with brand building, leadership, and marketing, all sorts of good stuff. It's part of his LLC. But as you might have guessed, he has actually embarked on a journey to open a local brewery in Cincinnati, more specifically the town of Morrow. If you're from Cincinnati, I've been there for 7.5 years. It's a bit north of the city, right? There's this really
Some
cool,
would say it's not Cincinnati.
I would say it's not Cincinnati. We'll call it Greater Cincinnati. But there's this really cool brewery, or I'm sorry, really cool train depot, which is on Scott's background, just behind his head there. There you go. It's really cool, and it is just screaming to be a brewery. And Scott is the one who grabbed that opportunity and is well on the way to opening the doors to the depot, which I'm personally very excited about. I travel there a lot and been discussing this journey for a while. So super exciting. We're going to talk about all that and more on today's podcast. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Feel lucky to be number 130, sir.
Awesome, awesome. You know what? I didn't even mention that you used to have a band way back in the day, which you're way too modest about, by the way, because demo for me, and it was good stuff. It was good, catchy stuff. You're too self-deprecating about your rock and roll past, I must say.
I've been told I'm self-deprecating, yes, and what could have been. We can only wonder if Shore would have made it to the big stage.
All right. Okay. So before we get into it, I like to take my daily magic mind shot here. Take a look at this. It's a mental performance shot. I've been taking it for months now. It works really well for me. It's got all these natural ingredients that my doctor said I should be taking, like ashwagandha, all kinds of stuff. I have no idea what that is, but my doctor says it's good. So I take it, makes me feel better. I've gone from 3 cups of coffee a day to two. I feel energized. I feel clear-minded. I feel a break in my stress. It's working for me. They've got this great promotion this month that they're calling the mental wealth promotion. So they're focusing on all the good stuff when it comes to what you're ingesting, your sleep, your stress level, all kinds of stuff, what you're taking into your body, all that sort of thing. And they have this great promotion. So if you're interested in trying this with me, go to magicmind.com/rock and roll Jan. Rock and roll Jan. That will get you 45% off of a really nice bundle. So a good way to get started. To give it a shot, why don't you ping me and let me know what you think? Hopefully you like it the way I do. So I'm going to take this down the hatch, Scott, and we're going to jump in. Sound good?
Sounds good. I'll have to look into that. Need some magic mind.
Yeah, good stuff. Flavor's growing on me too. Cool. All right. So Scott, let's talk this. I know I always thought it was unusual when we first met because P&G was not your first job, and that is not usually the case, or at least it wasn't then. P&G hired mostly out of school, so you started elsewhere. So tell us a little bit about your journey in the inside space.
Well, my mom would probably tell you it's because I asked why a lot growing up. But what I would tell you is I got into insights because of Cincinnati. I'm born and bred in Cincinnati, Ohio. Very proud to be from Cincinnati. I personally think Morrow is part of Cincinnati and very proud to be in Morrow as part of Greater Cincinnati. But growing up in Cincinnati, Procter and Gamble is held on a pedestal. And my grandfather, he was an ad man, old Mad Men style back in the 60s when they were really doing it up. And he
Yeah,
always talked about Procter and Gamble as prophet and God, Procter and God. And so I grew up just always hearing about Procter and Gamble. So naturally, loving my grandfather and admiring him as much as I did, I grew up always wanting to work at Procter and Gamble. The other
yeah,
two things that I wanted to be were a soccer player. So, I played soccer and I don't look like it anymore, but I played through college and did pretty well through
that's cool.
college.
Uh,
Um, and then lastly, the last thing I wanted to be, Matt, growing up was a lawyer. That's because I was obsessed with the OJ Simpson case in the eighth grade. I
Quite
loved Johnny
thoughtful, man.
Friend. Exactly. If the glove doesn't fit, you must have quit. I watched it every day with grandma after school. So I grew up in Cincinnati wanting to be one of those three things. I took my soccer talents to Bowling Green State University, where
Yeah,
I studied pre-law, and I graduated in God, a long time ago now, Matt, right before we met in '04. But I graduated in '04, and the economy wasn't like '08 bad, but it wasn't great. And
sure.
any job looks I was getting was up in northern Ohio, where I didn't want to be. My now wife, then girlfriend, was back in Cincinnati, so I wanted to get back to Cincinnati naturally. So in lieu of a job, I went to law school. I wanted to be a lawyer, so I actually went to law school for 2 months at the University of Cincinnati.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and decided I was there for all the wrong reasons. So I met plenty of great people there that were all about social reform, education reform, and just there for the right reasons. I was there because I wanted to be on TV. If the glove doesn't fit, you must have quit. And I realized it wasn't my passion. It was a lot more sitting behind a desk and reading than I thought it was. And the
Yeah,
percent of cases that actually go to trial like that are so few and far between. So I bounced. And when I bounced, I of course applied to P&G right away. I wasn't a professional soccer player. That didn't happen clearly. But I applied to P&G and I applied to a company called Cintas,
yeah.
another local Cincinnati company.
Uniform
Needless to
company,
say,
right?
the uniform company, the uniform people, I think they've broadened beyond that now to do promotional products and a whole other bunch of stuff. But yeah, you know them as the uniform people from back in the day.
Sure.
Another great Cincinnati company, Fortune 500, or was at the time. And so I just applied there because I'd heard of it, basically. But they knocked and called first, and I worked there for about a year. And then finally, the interview process with P&G happened, and I got in the door. And when I got in the door and I applied to marketing because that's what my undergrad was largely in, and I understood what that meant. But they
Sure.
also had this thing called CMK. I had
Right.
no idea what CMK was, but I looked at it and it looked close enough to marketing. And it looked similar to what I liked about law, analyzing problems, finding solutions.
Yeah.
And frankly, I would have been a janitor at P&G if they would have hired me for that. So when CMK called, I said, yeah, I'm going to do CMK and kind of fell into it. But fell into it and loved it for 17 and a half years. Still love it today, as you know. And that's kind of how it happened.
That's really, really cool. Okay, so why don't you take us why don't you take us a step further? So you did have a very good career at P&G. You had a senior role in, what was then known as CMK. What's it called now? Is it? market
So
intelligence.
CMK still exists, but then there's this analytics and insights umbrella that
Right.
integrates the best of CMK and IT function.
Ah, I see. I see. Yep. That's right. So everything's going great. But here you are, you're on this exciting journey to open a brewery. So what happened between this and that?
Well, long story short, a lot of stuff happened, but the real short story, the real sad story, unfortunately, is my dad got sick and ultimately passed. And I just did a long, hard look at myself and said, our days are numbered on this planet. What do
Yeah,
I ultimately want to do? What do I ultimately want to be remembered for? And while I loved everything about my experience at Procter and Gamble, and it's one of the best companies in the world, and I was very lucky to have those experiences, I was ready to start building something on my own. And so I sat here in my 40s and said, Dad died. My life could be short. It's time to start building something on my own. And I went to a brewery, but not only because I was a fan of craft beer. Ironically, I don't drink as much of it as I used to.
yeah,
I certainly have an appreciation for it, but I love what it does for community. And I believe every small community can support a brew pub. That was the first insight behind the brewery was I'm now living in Morrow. There's not really a presence like this. And I believe every community, especially in Cincinnati, where beer is big, as you know, can
sure.
support one of these local spots. And while there are some things close by, there wasn't really a strong presence in downtown Morrow. And so I said, why don't we build here? We're moving there. We're going to have our feet on the ground. I saw the train depot and found my way by chance into finding it out available. And I
Right.
said, let's do it here. And the rest was history. It wasn't certainly that easy, but the rest was history.
Yeah. Now last year we got together and we met up at the depot. So all it was still an old train depot. You had done no work on it or anything yet. In fact, I think it was just before it was fully approved for you to take it over.
Before I even had the contract on the building, I think.
Right. Yeah, it was just before that. But I have to tell you, just pulling up, it just was just obvious. Like this is tailor made. This is the highest and best use of this property. And I could just see it, on a summer evening, how wonderful it would be if you're by yourself or if your family, you got the kids running around. Just such a perfect site for it.
Yeah, I sure hope so. I mean, it was built in the 1840s. The claim to fame is that Abraham Lincoln ventured through there on the way to his inauguration. So it's got a lot of great history. But yeah, you see it. Others saw it. They wanted to do a brewery too. So I wasn't the first one. I just happened to get the opportunity. And like you said, close the contract in July. But what I'm most excited about, this train station last serviced this community in a meaningful way 50 years ago when it was last a train station. So it used to bring people from all over. It was the hub
Right.
of the community. It hasn't been that for 50 years. Hopefully, flipping it into a brew pub, it becomes that hub of the community and anchor of the community again, and
Yeah.
people come from all over. And as a marketer, you get so jazzed by that concept, right? Like bring people back together like the train station of old did. I'm sitting here getting goosebumps thinking about it.
Yeah, and you know what I really love about it? So one thing is you still have you're still doing some consulting work on the side. I know we've chatted about a couple of those projects, really good stuff. Still working with great companies. So you get to scratch that itch in that way on a consulting side. But here, now you're living and breathing it. When you're working in insights, you're always providing recommendations, but now you're responsible for using those insights, applying them, and being the beneficiary of good thinking, or, if you got it wrong, then you bear the consequence. So how does that feel for you?
Yeah, well, a couple things. One, I'm very fortunate to still have my toes in the industry. As you said, I'm a consultant. So, thanks to Ryan McCarty and Collective 12, I still get to keep my toes wet. And that was very important to me because I
Sure.
still love the industry so much and I didn't want to be so far removed. So that definitely keeps my toes in, but also keeps me invigorated and close enough to the community. And that's a good piece and something I'm very happy to do. So thank you for mentioning that. But yeah, on the brewery, you're right. Like in an insight seat, you're often the one giving people the recommendations, and they make the choice to act on it or not with your influence.
Right.
I now am both the insights person and the
It's
person making the decision. But the beauty of being an insight, I think the background of insights makes you such a better decision maker. The analytical thinking, the integration of thinking, the
yeah.
discipline of thinking, all of that I'm able to practice on a daily basis. And if I've learned anything from insights, it's start with the consumer first. What I'm so lucky about in what I'm doing, especially where I'm doing it, my
Yeah.
boots are on the ground every day, Matt. I'm going into the
Yes.
restaurants. I'm meeting these people. So I know who my consumers are. I meet them every day. I know what they want. I can use my social media, which has grown fantastically due to the support of the community,
Yeah.
ask people their opinions. So while I'm not doing insights on a daily basis, I'm probably doing it more than I ever did in my old seat because I'm out on the street every day. And that's one thing I'd say is a problem with insights today. I think the pendulum swung so far to big data, AI, machine learning. I
Yeah.
think we're missing out on a bit on that human element. Well, I'm in this position now where the human element is so critical and I get to live and breathe it every day. I'm really in the front seat more than I ever have been.
Yeah, I love that insight. And I think that will carry part of carry for a while into the future in the insights industry, this human element piece. Because you're totally right. And I've actually seen it kind of evolve over time where there was a time when quantitative research drove the bus. But now increasingly when it comes to strategy, qualitative research is extremely important. And they often have the voice of the executive layer, more so than the quant heads do. So there's a lot of promise about AI, big data, all that kind of stuff. But to really truly know the customer, I tend to agree with you. You need that human touch.
Yep. And I'm just lucky to get it every day now.
Yeah, cool. All right, so this is media, of course. A podcast is media. We all consume media, and you mentioned yourself you're on social media a whole lot more than you used to be. So tell me about what your media landscape looks like nowadays.
Well, I spend a lot of time on Facebook and Instagram now, but not as
Yeah,
a purveyor of them,
yeah,
but as someone trying to reach my consumers. So I do spend way too much time on there, but you have to. When you're on the front lines and you're really doing the hands-on keyboards work, you have to be on there all the time, looking for something that's topical or relevant to be able to give up to your fan base. I'm fortunate now that what I'm creating builds its own content because I get to take pictures and videos of the development and I share it. I also engage people in the co-creation of the building. Like, what about this choice? What about this choice? And so it's a nice little niche that I found to do that. But I'm on there all the time, seeing what other people are doing, seeing if there's anything relevant that I want to make content about. And it's a behavior that I didn't have in my
right,
job at Procter and Gamble because that wasn't my job. Now that's
right.
one of the many hats that I wear. So that's certainly one. I love movies, Matt. So I go to a lot of movies. We have a nice little Regal monthly pass. It's like 18 bucks a month. See all the movies you can see. I don't get to see as many as I want, but I'll tell you, I at least get my value back each month. I probably see at least two movies. One that I
Sure,
saw recently was A Complete Unknown. I recommend it if you haven't seen it, especially because this is you love music, but Bob Dylan, his story during that time, it was a great
for sure,
flick. And I love documentaries, business documentaries.
too.
Um, Recently, I've been watching video game documentaries, The King of Kong, and it was about this
Ah,
guy who won in the 80s, and then this other guy who challenged him more recently to beat his score in the big debacle about this. And, but it brought back so much of the 80s and 90s for me, which I grew up in. And so that's been the latest thing. So no real rhyme or reason, just what I get into.
yeah, just a couple reactions. I did hear about that King of Kong thing, and the insinuation was that he was cheating, right? somehow cheating?
The insinuation was that he cheated because some guy that was in bad with the advisory board sent him the board to play on. And so they thought maybe he had tinkered into it.
Yeah.
So he sent in a video and scored over 1 million points, which had never been done before, and they discounted it. Well, this other guy got to send in the video and get over 1 million points, and it was fine. So controversy of video games was in full effect.
Cool, cool. Now, the other reaction I have is the Dylan movie, and I've heard that Timothy Chalamet is extremely convincing as Bob Dylan.
Excellent.
The only thing that's kept me away so far, I am intrigued by the film. Um, the thing that's kept me away is that I read that it's about Dylan the New York years, not Dylan the Minneapolis years, which I was a little bummed out by because there's this little area near the University of Minnesota campus, which of course I am an alum of. Grew up in
No
Minnesota.
Gophers.
It's called Dinkytown. That's like this college area, and Bob Dylan lived above the drugstore in Dinkytown, and so I've got this whole lore of him in Minnesota. Maybe I don't know as much about him in New York, so I should watch it, but I don't know.
I mean, I'm
I'm a
surprised
homer.
they
I'm a
didn't take
homer.
his
What can I say?
Minnesota years as much as you are. New York, Minnesota. But I
Yeah.
didn't know that. I didn't know. I never heard of Dinkytown, and I didn't know Bob Dylan lived in Dinkytown.
Well, it's one of those things where uh, if you drive into Kentucky, for example, they claim over Abraham Lincoln, but of course everyone associates Abraham Lincoln with Illinois. It's just one of those things. Nobody knows that part of Bob Dylan's existence unless you're from Minnesota, and then everybody knows because it's like, hey, he's one of ours. He's one of ours. That's
Like
kind
New Jersey and Bruce Springsteen or something.
of that's right. That's right. So, so give me a quick update on where you are with the depot, when you plan to open, all that good stuff. Because we're talking about media, and I did see some media that you were in, some TV interviews, some print pieces, well, print and online. But it's great to see you getting some nice PR around Cincinnati. A brewery. I'm sure you can get a lot of earned media in that town on that topic. But let us know where you stand currently.
Yeah, you're right. We've been very fortunate. And Matt, I don't want to say it was easy, but I was
Yeah,
surprised that I was getting them reaching out to me. And it just goes to show that the story of the renovation of a building like this in a community
yeah,
where there's revitalization to be has legs. It has nothing to do with me. I'm just fortunate to be sitting in the driver's seat of this awesome endeavor. So that press has been great. I hopefully there's more, but that's certainly been a fun part of the ride. That again wasn't a part of my day job at Procter and Gamble that I'm learning through and trying to get more of. On
right.
top of that, we just do a lot with the community. I try to promote the community as much as the depot itself because I want people to come tomorrow. It really is a hidden gem, and I don't think people are too aware of it. So part of my job is not only to build depot, but to build people to come to the community and build up the community around us. And I
Yeah,
really look at that as a responsibility that we have.
love it, love it. And potential opening date.
Yeah, back to your question, I guess more directly, where we're at now. We started this officially in March of 23. When I say we, my wife and I remember sitting down with her and saying, I want to leave this big corporate job. Are you okay? I don't think she thought I was real at first, but 2 years later now, I can say we have our eyes set on opening in spring. We're
Awesome.
doing the plumbing and concrete work on the floor this week. So we'll be able to get people in there to start putting in the electric and the HVAC. And that's just it's so fulfilling, Matt. Like you said it earlier, I can make decisions, I might fail, but I've never been more fulfilled than building on my own. And I would rather take the shot to build something on my own and fail than to say
Yeah.
I never did it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I can't wait to taste my first pint there. So very cool. And you are going to be brewing your own beer and all that good stuff, right?
Yeah, we'll be brewing our own beer. We'll have 12 taps.
Hmm.
We'll also have some guest brews and collaborations. We have four scheduled to start. And then on top of that, we'll have a full bar, recognizing that not everybody drinks craft beer. We want to be a place for everyone. And that was the second big insight behind the place, Matt. We sit in Morrow in Middle America. Morrow is Middle America.
Yeah,
And this isn't to get political, and that's not my intent here, but I believe Middle America wants Middle America back. I hope, maybe I hope more than I believe, that we're tired of the divisive fringes and we all want to come back together. Maybe
yeah,
it's a bit altruistic,
for
but
sure.
I'm hoping that Depot becomes a place where everybody can come regardless of their background, just like the train station before.
For sure. And dude, it's very interesting that you say that you want to have the full bar because my wife has and I have been talking. I had this for the back half of 2024. I had a, a, a monthly house gig at a brewery here in Dallas, right? And they brew great beer and everything. And my wife doesn't usually come to my gigs. It's a rarity when she does. But I'm like, hey, this place is really cool. You should just check it out, come on in. But the problem for her is she doesn't really drink beer, is that they don't have anything but beer. And so she's like, so it just kind of, she's like, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not coming to any more gigs here. So it kind of created that divide. They had nothing for her, so
Yeah,
it's a real
you
bummer.
can't do that anymore. We'll have
Yeah,
seltzers, ciders, liquor because
yeah,
THC drinks are a thing now too, and something we'll have to consider.
right,
But
right, yeah,
got to have something for everybody if you're looking to bring everybody together.
for sure. And food as well. Will you have a kitchen?
So short term, I'll rely on food trucks like many breweries do.
Yeah,
Longer term, I have a plan to convert. I think you saw the caboose on the property
I
into
did.
the commercial kitchen,
Yeah,
because
perfect.
the inside of the building was too small. But we have the caboose as well. We're working through some things on that, but that's where I'd like to get sooner than later. So we'll be a full service establishment.
Yeah, yeah, feels kind of like a Texas ice house sort of thing. So
Never
something to
been.
check out. Well, you should. So come to Dallas. I'll show you what it's all about. All
Maybe
right.
you and your band need to open up the depot.
Say the word. Say the word.
Bring your wife.
Well, I think she would be just happy to jump on a plane and come to a gig that way. So we'll talk about it. All right. So we've talked about lots of things so far, but the one thing we haven't really talked about is rock and roll. And you were in a rock band before. Um, and
If you
I
call it
know,
rock.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, general category. So I have I have a sense of your musical taste a little bit, but I'm very curious to hear. So you know what question's coming, Scott? It's the desert island disc question. You're stranded on a desert island. You've got three albums of your choosing to keep you company for the rest of your days. What are those albums?
This is a tough question, and I bet everybody says that, Matt, but
Yeah,
I had to really think long and hard about that because I love all music, and I love all music. So I
yeah,
listen to country, hip hop, rock. It doesn't matter. It's very eclectic, and it depends on the day. But when I really sat down and thought about this, I had to go back to my roots. I'm a kid of the 80s and 90s.
yeah,
My formative years were in the 90s. And so I've got to give a shout out to some alternative rock bands. My all-time favorite is Pearl Jam. I would
yeah,
definitely take 10 on the island.
yeah. Nice.
Jeremy is a song that I remember vividly from my youth, and I just got to see them at Wrigley this past year, which was amazing. I'm going
Oh,
to
that's
Nashville
cool.
this year to see him in Music City. So they would
That's
definitely be
cool.
on the deserted island. And then I stayed in the same era, and I had to pick Smashing Pumpkins,
Uh-huh.
Melancholy, and the Infinite Sadness. I don't know if you remember that
Interesting.
2 disc album.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
some beautiful melodies and songs on that, and it has a flavor of like hard rock with Zero. I think that's what it's called. And then just some other real quaint stuff that I just think is beautiful and melodic. So I'd have that on there. And
Okay.
then I had to think a little bit more recently, and I was thinking to Bob Dylan. I'm listening to a lot of Bruce Springsteen, and
Uh-huh.
Zach Bryan recently. I think
Okay.
Zach Bryan is really I think he's someone to watch as far as the singer of this generation potentially. He seems to
Sure.
have something going there. So I'd probably steal something of his to bring along for the ride as well.
Okay. Okay. Good choices. Good choices for sure. Excellent. We've certainly had some mentions of Pearl Jam and Smashing Pumpkins on the podcast, so that's great. This is where I have some quantitative data, right? So 130 episodes, three times 130. I've got almost 400 observations on this one now. I'm not sure if we've had a Zach Bryan mention yet, but I would not be surprised. So super cool, Scott. Hey, you know what? I'm really happy that we've stayed friends over the years. I think we've always had some things in common, and I'm grateful for our friendship for sure.
As am
And I'm
I.
totally in your corner on the depot, and I've been along for the ride, kind of following your path, and I cannot wait, like I said, to have my first sip at the depot once it's finally open. If I'll try to make grand opening if I can, for sure. So
We've got to try to make that happen. There's always a reason to bring you back to Cincinnati. But yeah, I share your sentiment. You're a great friend. You're a great dude. And I'm so lucky to be here with you today. And can't wait to see you again, work together, and give you that pint.
yeah, yeah, excellent, man. One quick reminder for our listeners, if you're interested in Magic Mind, mental performance shot, good stuff. Great deal on a bundle this month. It's magicmind.com/rock and roll Jan. But as for you, Scott, we'll see you soon.
All
Hopefully
right.
it's at that opening. So awesome. Rock and roll.